Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Today I want to talk about the four towers on top of the Jedi Temple that play a very important part in the governance of the entire order. If you can figure out how an institution structures its power, you can learn a lot about it. The Jedi Temple in many ways is a symbol of the Jedi's arrangement with the Republic and the trust the citizens of the galaxy have placed in this holy order of Force users. Long ago, during the early days of the Republic, a rogue Jedi carried out an insurrection against the Order, unleashing the dark side of the Force for the first time against the Jedi. Caught off guard, the Jedi Order was forced to go into exile, and these dark side Force users would seize control of the center of the galaxy and the planet of Coruscant. Thus would begin a period of time known as the 100 Years of Darkness. This would also mark the inception of the Sith Order. Now, Coruscant has always been home to a massive light side Vergence. That's Force Nexus for all of you Legends fans out there. A Force Vergence is basically a huge concentration of Force energy. Some Vergences, like the Cave on Dagobah or the Cavern on Ahch-To, were aligned with the dark side. Others are neutrally aligned, which I think the one on Brendok could potentially be. The Vergence on Coruscant was a light side aligned one and one of the most powerful in the galaxy. It was also very centrally located, which made it convenient for everyone, and it was also on the planet itself located in a mountain. The Sith would construct a massive black temple known as the Shrine of the Depths over it in an attempt to corrupt the light side energy source. The Jedi would eventually return to Coruscant and drive out the Sith and lay siege to the Black Temple, razing it to its foundations. But little did the Jedi realize the Sith had actually corrupted this light side Vergence. And so when the Jedi built their own temple over the Dark Shrine, that darkness would slowly taint their own powers over the millennia. The Republic, in recognition of the Jedi's service and sacrifice, would gift them the area around the mountain. This part of the city would become known as the Temple Precinct, a prime swath of real estate in the most desirable part of the city. It remains one of the only areas on Coruscant's surface with height restrictions for buildings. This is intentionally designed to accentuate the dominance and grandeur of the Jedi Temple's main ziggurat structure. It's interesting that the Jedi Order chose to create a ziggurat for their temple. This is kind of different from the pyramid-shaped temples the Sith like to build. The Massassi Great Temple on Yavin 4, utilized by the Rebel Alliance during the Galactic Civil War, is a good example of typical Sith design. Now, the Egyptians most famously utilized the pyramid structure. This in many ways was a visual representation of how Egyptian society was structured into different castes, and how all of the various castes served to prop up the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. The pyramids were a literal stairway to heaven. The Yavin 4 temple is based off of real-life, I believe, Mayan pyramids located in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The Mayans also had a caste system as well that was common in the ancient world. The Sith species, which is where the name Sith comes from, also had a culture that was structured in a hierarchical way, where you have basically a few wielding power over the many. Therefore, the pyramids they built for their Sith overlords were designed to highlight the power of the dark side Force users who arrived like gods in their society and basically just took over. Now, the ziggurat structure is a little bit different. It's still related to religious worship, but it is associated with the ancient Babylonians. These massive structures served as a base, a foundation not for living rulers, but for the gods themselves. Usually there were shrines built on top of these ziggurats where people could worship various gods. The ziggurats served as a connection between heaven and earth, or in this case, sentient beings in the Force. The Jedi Temple ziggurat also served as a foundation of sorts for the most important members of the Jedi Order, who weren't necessarily godlike, but they might as well be, considering how much power the Jedi Order wielded. There are 5 spires in total at the top of the building. At the center is the Tranquility Spire. Its base runs from the peak of the Holy Mountain, which is where the Jedi Temple is built on, and overlooks the entire temple district. It's actually considered the holiest part of the Jedi Temple, and there's actually a small gallery with, various artworks that depict the history of the Jedi. Interestingly enough, during the height of the Clone Wars, the Central Spire was converted into a war room of sorts, from which the Jedi High Command would oversee the various theaters of war they were engaged in. This perversion of such a holy place is just another example of how lost the Jedi had become during this period. Now, what we're going to focus on in this video are the 4 spires that surround the Tranquility Spire. If the ziggurat below serves as the foundation for the Jedi Order, filled with thousands of Jedi and support personnel who work inside the building. Then the 4 spires are what the ziggurat with the Jedi body supports. These are the 4 individual command organizations within the larger Jedi organization. In each one of these spires, one of the 4 major councils were housed. These councils were made up of Jedi Masters that essentially ran the Jedi Order. They commanded the Jedi's every move and action, both internally and externally. They had a great effect on galactic events. Not even the Republic Senate had much sway over the individual decisions of these powerful ranking members of the Order. The first tower we'll be talking about is the Reassignment Council Tower, which we briefly mentioned in our previous video. This tower housed the Reassignment Council, which is made up of several Jedi Masters from the various Jedi Service Corps. When a Jedi Initiate does not get selected to be a Padawan by a Jedi Knight or Master, they are reassigned to one of the various Service Corps. The Service Corps, while not as glamorous as joining the Army of the Light and becoming a Knight or Master, was still incredibly important for the day-to-day operations of the Jedi Order. One could even argue, especially during times of peace, that the Service Corps did a whole lot more for the galaxy than the Jedi Knights ever did. While many Jedi initiatives ultimately went home after they failed to be selected as a Padawan, many would actually be assigned into one of these Jedi Service Corps. So the Service Corps include the Exploration Corps, which is responsible for not only finding new hyperspace routes and setting up communications in the peripherals of the galaxy, but also for sending out Jedi Seekers to recruit new Force Sensitives to the Order. Then you have the Agricultural Corps. They basically run and operate a variety of different farms, greenhouses, and research centers where they basically grow and research various plants. Many of them are Force Sensitive and have unique properties. Lastly, we have the Education Corps and the Medical Corps. Now, these things only exist in Legends so far, but as you'll see in the rest of the video, they do exist to a certain extent in canon. I figured maybe they just switch them around a little bit. The Educational Corps is made up of teachers, scholars, and archivists. They operate the Jedi Library and keep records of various artifacts stored inside of the temple. They also produce research and philosophical works, which fell in line with the larger Jedi mission. The Medical Corps operated the infirmary inside of the Jedi Temple, which is on par with some of the finest hospitals in the galaxy. They used a mix of modern medicine and also Force techniques to heal their patients. It should also be noted that every member of the Service Corps could be deployed into the field for a variety of different reasons. During the Clone Wars, the Service Corps was militarized, and so a lot of members of the Medical Corps, for instance, served as battlefield doctors and medics. At the base of the Reassignment Council Tower was the Chamber of Judgment. This is where the Jedi held trials for their own members who have gone astray. These are not traditional trials like with what you would see in a civilian court or a military tribunal. There are no lawyers, no prosecutors, no witnesses. Instead, you had a hand-picked group of Jedi Masters who discussed whatever the issue was and then just passed judgment afterwards. While acceptable to the Jedi who have traditionally prosecuted their own for millennia, during the Clone Wars, because the Jedi served in the military as well as soldiers, there was kind of a conflict of interest and controversy when certain Jedi like Ahsoka Tano were accused of treason against the Republic.
The Senate believes that an internal Jedi trial would seem biased. Therefore, the Senate asks that the Council expel Ahsoka Tano from the Jedi Order, so that she may be put to a Republic military tribunal, where she will receive more impartial judgment.
From an optics point of view, it would have been terrible if the Jedi had just cleared her for her crimes, and that is because the traditional civilian and military justice system could not touch a Jedi until they left the Order. And so the Jedi Council basically had to expel Ahsoka in order to avoid a huge publicity nightmare. As you can see, the more intertwined the Jedi became with the political matters of the Republic, the more difficult it was for them to keep their own traditions and follow their Jedi code. The second tower on top of the ziggurat was known as the Tower of Reconciliation. It was here that the Council of Reconciliation sat and wielded what honestly is one of the greatest powers that the Jedi Order had. And it was actually a power that they didn't really corrupt that much. You see, the Jedi were not just peacekeepers. They weren't just fighters and warriors. The Jedi were also used as diplomats and negotiators for a variety of different interplanetary disputes and commercial disputes. The galaxy, especially during the golden age of the Republic, highly valued the opinions of the Jedi Order and saw them as truly neutral arbitrators of the law that could be trusted when all other avenues of negotiations had failed. The Tower of Reconciliation basically coordinated directly with the Republic Diplomatic Corps. They would serve as either advisors from Coruscant or deploy their own counselors directly with Jedi judicials or Jedi diplomats throughout the entire galaxy. Although it should be mentioned, while some factions would drop their differences in the presence of the Jedi, there were also groups that really hated the Jedi, and actually the presence of a Jedi counselor in a negotiation might actually derail the entire talks. In some cases, as we see on Brendok, the witches of the Coven definitely don't really like the Jedi at all. In other cases though, sending the Jedi into hotspots like during the blockade in Naboo, where there was a high level of danger, was ideal, because these diplomats could not only negotiate on behalf of the Senate, they could also handle themselves quite well in battle, and observe what was actually happening on the ground and report back to the Senate. I actually really like the idea of Jedi diplomats. Jedi counselors are trained somewhat to be more even-keeled than their more combat-focused counterparts. They aren't immune from their emotions or becoming corrupt, of course, but I feel like the nature of the job requires more mental discipline and procedure. And so when deployed as negotiators, as long as they can stay within the framework of their position, which has much clearer rules in the Jedi Code, I feel like a Jedi can do a whole lot of good. Although even so, as the Republic became more chaotic and corrupt, it even became hard for Jedi diplomats to keep their cool. That's one of my favorite episodes from Tales of the Jedi. It's excellent. Next up, we have the Tower of First Knowledge. This houses the Council of First Knowledge, which is very similar to the educational core that we mentioned in our previous section. And I guess Lucasfilm Story Group has given this educational wing of the Jedi Order its own tower just to show how important knowledge is for the Jedi Order, and it makes a lot of sense. Because knowledge was the key to the Jedi's ability to not only control its own members, but also the future of the Force. The Council of First Knowledge had two main purposes. The first one was basically running the Jedi Academy, instructing all of the students who passed through the halls of the Jedi Temple, setting up their curriculum and all these other things. The second responsibility was overseeing the Jedi Archives. Led by the Chief Librarian, this part of the organization diligently documented and protected the wide range of artifacts, holocrons, and other objects being stored in the temple. There's not only a depository for knowledge and information, mind you, there are also priceless wonders, ancient weapons, armor, and a really cool collection of lightsabers. The Chief Librarian and her staff jealously guarded all of this information and all of these items from the rest of the Order and the rest of the galaxy. You had entire off-limit areas full of dark side-oriented artifacts and holocrons that were only accessible when individuals were given permission by one of the Jedi Councils. The Tower of First Knowledge and Legends also deployed agents out into the wider galaxy, kind of like Indiana Jones. These individuals were basically hunting down artifacts that were either something that the Jedi Order wanted to study or were just deemed to be too dangerous to be allowed to be in the wild. Now, because the Jedi Archivists had so much knowledge of the information within the library, they were also valued as advisors for basically everyone in the Order, especially by field agents who needed more information or preparation before going out on a mission. Lastly, we have the Jedi High Council. This is where all the big decisions were made. This is where Ki-Adi-Mundi made all those mistakes. Every time that guy opened his mouth, millions died. The council consists of a central chamber around which the members of the High Council sat. They are the ruling body of the Jedi Order and make all of the most important decisions on what course of action the Jedi as an organization will take. Around the perimeter of the tower were the 3 contemplation stations where individuals could hang out, contemplate if they want, reflect on what was going on, as the High Council talked about them behind their backs inside. The High Council itself was made up of 12 individual Jedi Masters, and they were led by the Master of the Order. This is a separate position from the Grand Master, but Yoda just happened to hold both positions during the Clone Wars. The Grand Master was a title given to the wisest Jedi in the Order. That individual would also serve as the leader of the Order. The Master of the Order just led the High Council. I guess you could say that these two positions are kind of like the dual executives you find in a lot of parliamentary democracies in our own world. The High Jedi Council not only made decisions about the Jedi's future, they were also involved in the political dealings between the Jedi and Senate. As we learn in the Acolyte, during the High Republic period, the Senate was privy to all information being discussed in the High Jedi Council, which is why Vanessa Rowe tried to keep the murder of the Brendock Four away from the High Council. She was worried that the political enemies in the Senate would get wind of what was going on and use that to basically attack the Jedi and maybe audit them, which is honestly something they probably needed. But anyway, the members of the High Council were also responsible for tracking the progress of each one of the Padawans within the Jedi Order. And this is because they approved when a Jedi could undergo trials to become a Jedi Knight. They also were the ones who decided who could be promoted to the rank of Master, something that Anakin never obtained even after he killed like every last Jedi he could find. The High Council's last role was basically accepting the military leadership of the clone army, a job that ultimately put them in the perfect position to get blasted in the back. I guess that was their last test, realizing that growing an army of clones and forcing them to fight to their deaths was morally wrong. But hidden Sith Shrine for the win. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed our video for today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.